David Langston wasn't the kind of man who stumbled. Not in business, not in logic, not even in love. At 35, he had built an empire from code and cold ambition. As the youngest tech billionaire on the West Coast, David was known for his brilliance, his ruthlessness, and his solitude, until she walked in. He met her on a stormy night. Inside a glass-walled museum, buzzing with silk gowns and champagne flutes. Charity galas were where the rich pretended to be generous, and David, dressed in sharp black with eyes on the exits, was already planning his escape. Then he saw her. Lena Moreau. She stood alone by the tall windows, rain cascading behind her like a painting in motion. She wasn't mingling. She wasn't vying for attention. She just existed, calm, elegant, magnetic. A woman who didn't beg the room to notice her. She made the room quieter just by being in it. Their eyes met. And for the first time in years, David forgot what time it was. He crossed the floor before he could think. David Langston. Lena Moreau. A soft smile, a voice like piano and candlelight. They talked until the party faded. About books, about cities they'd both dreamed of visiting, about everything except money or fame. When she laughed, it sounded like something he hadn't known he missed. That night didn't end in fireworks. It ended in something far more dangerous. Curiosity. A year later, she became his wife. They were married on the cliffs of St. Trifalno. Reporters, no cameras, no spectacle. Just crashing waves, a sky the color of spilled wine, and the kind of silence that feels holy to the world. He was the untouchable billionaire. To her, he was just David, and that terrified him more than anything. Lena moved into his secluded estate in the San Francisco Hillsa, place of stone, glass, and sharp-edged design. She softened everything. She played jazz in the mornings, left little notes in his books, brought fresh peonies to the rooms he never stepped into, and somehow she never felt like a guest. She felt like she belonged in every corner of his life. David, a man who once calculated every risk, started taking ones with his heart. He let her in. He let her stay. And he believed genuinely. He knew her. But even in paradise, there are shadows. And Lena had a past, one she never talked about. She said she grew up everywhere and nowhere. She changed the subject when old friends came up. And when he asked about her past relationships, she smiled, leaned in, and said, "Lena, you're the only one who counts." David wanted to ask more. But something about her silence was sacred, and he convinced himself not to push. After all, he had secrets too. Still, questions lingered in the quiet. Then came the letters. They appeared without warning, neatly folded sheets left on the garden table beneath the ivy arch where Lena liked to read. There were no stamps, no envelopes, just words. One morning, David walked outside and caught her standing over one, still, pale, holding it like a burning match. When she saw him, she flinched and smiled too fast. "Lena, it's just junk, nothing important." He didn't believe her, not really, but he let it go. That night, she barely touched her wine. She stared too long at the fireplace. And when she slipped into bed, her hands were cold. David held her anyway, but her body felt miles away. The next day, she avoided the terrace altogether, stopped humming when she cooked, started leaving the room when her phone buzzed. David wasn't. Used to doubt, but it crept in, inequate, relentless. One evening, while Lena was out with her friend Nora, he walked to the garden and opened the side drawer of the table. There it was, folded, waiting, no name, no return address, just temptation. His hand hovered, but he didn't read it. Because even now, he still wanted the truth to come from her lips. Later that night, he found her in the library, not reading, just pacing, picking up books, setting them down again. A rhythm of unease. "David, is something wrong?" Leaning against the doorway, she looked up, startled, then shook her head with a hollow smile. "Lena, no. Just couldn't sleep." "Out." He crossed the room and took her hand gently. "David, Lena. Out. If something's wrong, if someone's bothering, you can tell me. I'm your husband." For a second he saw it, the flicker in her eyes, truth pressing against her lips. But she swallowed it. Lena, I know. It's just been a strange week. And with that, she pulled away and disappeared into their room. That night, David dreamt of a stranger. Standing at their door, Lena opened it. The stranger smiled, and David was locked on the other side of the glass. He woke up before sunrise, sweating, alone. In the silence, he realized it wasn't a dream. It was a warning. And the past he thought she buried was already on its way back. The knock came at noon. David had just returned from a strategy meeting downtown when he heard it sharp, deliberate, echoing through the marble halls of their home. He wasn't expecting anyone. Most people didn't just show up at the Langston. Estate security usually caught them long before the front door, but when he opened it, there was no guard, no assistant, just one man, standing confidently on the threshold, tall, lean, in his late 30s, dressed in a dark overcoat, no umbrella, even though the clouds were thick with rain. His eyes was cold, but familiar like a bad memory that never quite faded. Stranger, is Lena home? David's hand tensed on the door. He didn't reply right. Away. Instead, he studied the man. Square jaw. Faint scar along his chin. A voice that tried to sound polite, but carried weight. David, and you are? The man's lips curled slightly, almost amused. Stranger, Julian Graves. I think she'll want to see me. The name hit David like ice water Graves he'd heard that name before? Briefly once. On a quiet evening months ago when Lena, tipsy from too much wine, had let something slip. A name. A warning. A mistake. David, you're from her past. Julian, no. I am her past. And then, like he owned the moment, Julian stepped forward, uninvited. Inside the house, Lena froze. She heard Julian's voice before she saw him. And something inside her chest cracked open like a wound she'd sealed with many layers of silence. David appeared in the doorway, jaw locked, eyes burning. Behind him stood like a ghost come back to life. David, is there something? You want to tell me? Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Everything she'd tried to bury. It was standing in her home, wearing a smug smile. They sat in the sunroom, though the light outside had dimmed. The room felt too still. The air too sharp. Julian lounged. In the corner chair, like he belonged there. Lena sat rigid, her hands clasped tight in her lap. David stood, arms crossed, hovering near the window, his back to both of them. Julian, I'm not here to cause problems. I just thought it was time for the truth. David, you mean the truth you brought to my door without warning? Julian, shrugging. What can I say? Some things need closure. Lena finally looked up, eyes glassy but steady. Lena, what do you want, Julian? He smiled faintly. Julian, I want to know why you left without a word. I want to know why you ran right. Before we were supposed to get married, David turned sharply. David, you were engaged? Lena opened her mouth, but the words stuck. This wasn't how she wanted him to find out. She had meant to tell him. One day, when it felt safe, Lena softly, yes, a long time ago. David, and you never thought to mention it? Lena, because it wasn't a love story. It was something I wanted to forget. Leon leaned back, eyes on her like a predator studying prey. Julian, you forget what we were? Lena? Lena sharply, no. I remember exactly what we were. I remember the manipulation, the surveillance, the way you made me feel like I belonged to you. Julian's smile faded. David's fists clenched. David, is that true? She turned to him, her voice trembling. Lena, I met Julian when I was 20. I thought he was charming, successful, kind, but it turned into something dark. He controlled everything, what I wore, where I went, who I spoke to. She paused, breath shaky. Lena, when I tried to leave, he threatened to ruin me, so I disappeared, changed my number, moved across the country. David sat down slowly, as if the weight of her words dragged him down. David, why didn't you tell me? Lena, Because I didn't want to bring that darkness into our life. I was ashamed. And scared that if he ever found me again, voice cracked, he'd destroy what we have. Julian stood. Julian, that's not how I remember it. David rose to meet him, standing inches away. David, she doesn't belong to you. And whatever version of the past you believe in, it's over. Julian, is it? 'Cause I have emails, photos, a ring she never gave back. Lena, you've kept those things to hold power over me. Julian, no, I kept them because you left without giving me a reason. Turned to David, his voice low and bitter. Julian, you think you know her, but you don't. She was mine first, and she's hiding more than you realize. That was the final straw. David, get out, now. Julian looked between them, David's fire, Lena's quiet fear, and realized there was no room left for him. He left without another word. That night, the house felt too big. David stood in the kitchen long after midnight, a glass of scotch untouched. In his hand, Lena entered quietly. Lena, I'm sorry. David, for what? For lying? For keeping me in the dark? For letting me build a life with a woman I only half know? She didn't flinch. Lena, no, I'm sorry. For not believing you could love me after you knew everything. She moved closer. Lena, if you want me to go, I will, but I won't lie anymore. Not about Julian. Not about anything. David looked at her, this woman he loved, this woman with edges he hadn't seen before. He didn't speak. He didn't stop her as she walked away. And that night, for the first time in months, she slept alone. Lena hadn't seen sunlight in 3 days. Rain outside mirrored the quiet storm inside the house. She and David moved through the halls like ghosts. Careful, distant to people aching in silence. He hadn't told her to leave, but he hadn't held her close either. That was the part that hurt most, because distance from a stranger is expected. But distance from the man who once kissed your fingertips every morning, that felt like dying in slow motion. In the 4th morning, Lena stood at the edge of their bed holding a small suitcase. She brushed her hand across the pillow where he used to sleep facing her, and closed her eyes as if trying to hold on to the echo of his warmth. She wrote a note and left it on his desk right next to the pen he always used, where she knew he would see it first. I've told you the truth. If it's not enough, I understand. But if your heart still beats for mine, I'll be waiting where it all began. I still love you, David, even if it's from a distance. She didn't slam the door when she left. She didn't look back sometimes. Love meant letting go. So it had the space to return stronger. David found the note that afternoon. He stared at her handwriting. Soft, precise, familiar, and, for the first time in years, the man who built empires felt completely powerless. He read the line, I still love you, David, over and over. The walls he'd built around his pride cracked, because the truth wasn't just about what she hadn't told him, it was about what he'd stopped giving her. Understanding, gentleness, belief. That night he didn't sleep. He walked through their home like a man remembering a dream. He had forgotten the garden where she laughed barefoot in summer rain, the kitchen where she once kissed his jaw, while the coffee brewed, the hallway where they danced with no music on their 2nd anniversary, and in the quiet he heard her voice, not aloud, but in every room she'd touched. He whispered into the dark, I miss you, Lena. God, I miss youth. Next morning, the rain softened into a light drizzled. David drove without thinking, just feeling. He didn't stop until he reached the small cafe by the museum, the one where she first let him hold her hand across a weathered table, the one where he realized he could fall in love with a woman who didn't need anything from him but his truth. Lena was there, as if she had known he would come. She sat near the window, face turned to the sky, eyes searching the clouds like they held answers. He walked in quietly. Bell above the door gave a soft chime. She turned, their eyes met, and for a long moment, nothing existed outside that gaze. No exes, no secrets, no silence. Anya still standing, still waiting. He sat across from her. She didn't smile, but her fingers curled slightly on the table like they remembered him. David spoke softly, I thought I needed answers to protect what we had, but what I really needed was to see all of you. Even the parts that hurt, even the parts I didn't know. She blinked but didn't look. Owahi reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Julian doesn't matter. Not anymore. The only thing I care about is if you still want to build this life with me." Her lips parted. "You still want me after everything?" David leaned in close, enough to feel her breath. "Eve never stopped wanting you, not even for a second. But I want more now. I want all of you. No more silence between us. No more guessing. Just us." Raw, real, unbreakable tears welled in her eyes. She stood slowly, and instead of answering with words, she kissed him. There in the corner of the cafe, as the rain tapped gently on the glass, Lena kissed her husband with the kind of love that says, "I'm yours. I never stopped being yours." That night they returned home together. Didn't speak much. They didn't need to. He cooked her dinner for the first time in months. She set the table with the napkins he never noticed, but she always folded with care. Later they danced in the living room to a song only they knew. His hand on her waist, her head on his shoulder. Forgiveness wasn't a single moment, it was in every step they took together before bed. David took her hand and whispered, "Lena, marry me again. This time without secrets, without fear, just us and the truth." She laughed, tearful, happy. "Only if you promise to always kiss me when I'm scared and never let me walk away alone again." "Always," he said, "always." From that day forward, they never needed letters again, because every morning they gave each other the only truth that mattered: a love worth fighting for, a life worth sharing, a future that finally belonged to both of them.